Next three videos are going to be about three principles for fun and fast language learning. This whole process of learning Chinese is a long-term thing. It's not something you're going to be able to do overnight. So considering a few different skill sets and a few different principles to follow through a long project is always a good way to go. Attitude is, of course, incredibly important. How could it not be? However, is the attitude you would apply to learning something like physics or learning how to do martial arts the same that you should apply to learning language? Well, yes and no. Even if you're learning one of the easier languages to learn for an English speaker like French or Spanish, it is still a relatively long-term project. And that being the case, we want to make sure that we're adopting the right ways of looking at the entire process to help us along the way. For example, if you think of language as being like this huge, big thing, in other words, you're taking it too seriously and you're not just experiencing it as an entertaining adventure, you're always going to be on the outside looking in. But of course, when it comes to language, a very important thing to consider, the culture that you're going to be dealing with when learning that language. We like to call this concept cultural weightlessness, aka focusing on the things you love and admire about the culture and the language. So the language part's easy because Chinese is super interesting. As you get to know the characters especially, you'll realize the language in and of itself is packed with anecdote and interesting story. And of course, the way that they structure the language will be giving you constant epiphanies about not only the language itself, but also your own interpretation of reality. However, let's look at the culture side of it. Now, I suppose some of you watching this may not be in China, but if you're learning Chinese, being in China is a very likely outcome. And of course, many of you already are in China. Every single culture in the world has aspects of it that are good and bad. There is no perfect culture. So you have a choice when dealing with any culture. Am I going to focus on the things that I don't like, or am I going to focus on the things that I do like? We've asked all of our students about what they like about China. Very, very consistently, we get people saying, I really like how friendly Chinese people are. I like how much they listen. That's my favorite thing about Chinese people, especially in Chengdu, where I live. The people are incredibly tolerant. They're always friendly. They're incredibly welcoming. The food here is amazing. There's interesting music. There's a great respect for family here. Now, there may be some things that I don't like about the culture, but those things that I don't like about the culture, I can make the choice to not focus on them as much. For example, a small thing that I'm not a huge fan of in the culture is the tendency of people, especially in the older generation, to spit on the ground when walking outside on the sidewalk. Where I come from, that's not a very common thing to see. So sometimes I will see that and feel a little bit grossed out. However, as I've lived here for now over 6 years, I've come to just accept that as a part of the culture and just be a bit weightless about it. Recognize that if I wanted everything to be perfect, well, then I better go find a different planet because Earth doesn't have any perfect cultures. But why do you need to do this when you're learning language? What does it have to do with language? Well, if you are culturally weightless, this means that you will find the things you like and you will want to engage with the people there. If you find the culture to be annoying, I meet some foreigners sometimes who have been here for years, and it's like all they do is complain about China. And I can't help but think this is kind of a strange place to choose to live if you're filled with so many complaints. And of course, if you have this many complaints, then why would you want to learn the language? So that you can talk to the people you detest? But if you focus on the things that you love and admire, as I have found many things that I love and admire about Chinese people, you end up wanting to know more. You want to delve in deeper. You want to find the thing that is going to help you connect with these people, because of course you would. When somebody is intellectually stimulating, when they're tolerant, when they're very accepting, when they're warm towards you, then naturally you want to express yourself more. You want to be able to communicate with them more because that is the human experience. So being culturally weightless, it might seem like it's unrelated to the language, but it's actually incredibly related to the language and it helps with your attitude. But another part about the attitude side of this is the confidence that you should have. 200,000 years ago, our ancestors split from chimpanzees and started to develop language. It's what makes us different from chimpanzees. Chimpanzees have some very basic language, but they don't have nearly as complex a language function within their brain as human beings do, as Homo sapiens do. So if you treat learning language like an academic discipline, then you're going to suck at learning it. And this is why 80% of people fail to learn Chinese. However, if you approach language as if you are amazing at learning language, as if you have 200,000 years of evolution related specifically just to interpreting reality and communicating that to the social environment around you, and recognizing that if you take the steps that facilitate that natural process of acquisition, you're going to be great at it. You've got a history of evolution behind you with this function in your brain that makes Socrates and Plato look like brand newborn babies. This is deep within your psyche. You can do it. So the only question is whether or not your attitude as you continue through this process remains focused on the fact that you want to learn it, the cultural weightlessness side, and that you know you can so long as the environment is right.